A very warm welcome to you all. We're going to start our presentation now, and I'd like to introduce you to Melany Mistrorigo and to say a very, very warm welcome to Melany. She's a relational pedagogy coach and an SEL and inclusion specialist. She's originally from Italy and she has been internationally trained. With a Master of Education from Leeds Beckett University and professional experience across Europe, she specialises in social emotional learning and inclusion. Melany's work with parents and educators focuses on shifting mindsets and providing practical strategies to navigate emotional challenges. Guided by the belief that our relationship with ourselves and our environment is the foundation of all learning, she aims to inspire others to see education as a deeply human and connected journey. We've called our conversation today Relational Pedagogy in Practice, Learning and Growing Side by Side. Central to our conversation, we want to talk about how within community-based schooling, relational pedagogy shapes parenting and learning. So we're going to reflect a bit on what happens when learning is centered around authentic relationships, where children and adults grow side by side. Melany, a very, very warm welcome to you. In our conversations together prior to today, you've talked about why increasing numbers of parents in Italy are seeking alternative schooling options for their children, and their wish to see relationships and student voice and choice as central to the pedagogy of their children's learning. Parental involvement and engagement are important aspects of your reflections about learning as a community. And in your master's thesis, you promoted the ideas of individuality and freedom, and relationships and dialogue, and what you call conscious parenting. So perhaps we can start by reflecting on why it is that Italian parents, and perhaps in other countries as well, but that's your area of focus, are increasingly seeking alternative schooling models where relationships rather than routines are at the heart of the child's learning. What values are driving this shift towards community-based relational approaches?
So first of all, hi, welcome, and thank you so much for having me. Before I even start with answering your question, which I'm so passionate about, I do need to mention ECIS. I want to be thanking everybody made this possible, and thank especially Cam and the sponsorship that allowed this master and this master thesis to happen. So after all credit is given where it's due, I'm very happy to tell you all about this movement. And the thing is that homeschooling and alternative schooling have always been around, even before actually public schooling, if we think about it. However, we need to address the elephant in the room, which is the pandemic. Because of COVID-19, a lot of parents realized that they wanted to be more involved in their children's education. They experienced distance learning. They might have experienced all the restriction during COVID. And so something that was a bit of a niche movement became suddenly almost mandated by the state, and then continued growing as its own thing afterwards. In Italy, we saw an increase that it's really staggering, from doubling during the pandemic era to still be quite strong these days. But even in the US, we know that homeschooling is interesting and definitely needs to be studied. So a phenomenon that requires a study. So this is why I decided to look into this type of communities, because also for international setting, we know that parents these days want something different. And the main values, as you mentioned them yourself, are this freedom, which is not just chaos or allowing the children to do whatever they want, but it's more this idea that children are their own being. And maybe the parents had this experience of growing in an institution where I want to quote one of the parents. At school, I was learning to follow instruction. Here, my daughter is learning based on her curiosity. So when the parents talk about the freedom as a value that they followed, it's about this idea that we have our own inside world with our curiosity, our interest, our motivations. And the parents seek a school where that is nurtured. And we know this from international education because it's at the base of IB. What really was more surprising to me was the fact that they placed so much value on relationship and dialogue. Some parents were able to compare maybe the educational history of older sibling, and the younger one that instead was growing in this community-based, relationship-based alternative schooling, where the conversation at home, once we take out all the pressure from homework and the conflict that were happening in school, they are centered around learning. And that's something that they really sought after. And finally, what we find out is that within this movement, a lot of the parents, they chose this kind of community-based, relationship-based type of education, not as a standalone choice, but as a deliberate decision that made sense in a wider framework, wanted to be more involved, wanted to grow together as children, which we see also in current literature is something very different from what parenting used to be. So the reason why I wanted to have this talk also for international educators is because international schooling already knows this. Parents these days want something different. They want the curriculum to be able to really give the children the ability to develop their full potential. But furthermore, what we are finding is that they want to be involved. They also want to be growing. They want to be learning. They want to be part of this experience.
Fantastic. I really pick up there on what you're talking about with the relationships and dialogue, where the conversation is central to the learning. It's beautifully put. I'd be interested to just explore now a little bit further what relational pedagogy that you're a specialist in looks like in practice. So how are student voice and choice and shared responsibility reflected in everyday learning experiences for the child?
Definitely. I think what will really help at this point is also a little bit defining relational pedagogy, because it might seem a bit odd, but it's actually a rather old established pedagogy, because we start off with Dewey and Montessori, and then it develops with Illich, Holt, and it also has traits in common with democratic, Reggio Emilia, and nature school. So it's the idea that learning and growth for everybody, children and adults alike, happens as a result of the relationship that we have with our inner world, with our physical world, so our body, the outer world, so the environment we create around the children, and also the social world, so the other people that we have around. So once we see learning like this, the very first aspect that the teacher or that the school might want to address is the environment, the emotional and the physical environment. One way I would like to paint a picture a little bit, it's a classroom that when you go in looks more like a school rather than an industrial setting, you know? And so what you see are open shelves, very much like in Montessori style, where the children can pick up activities that are either curated by the teacher or even created by some of their peers. And so their day starts by choosing already what they want to do based on the fact that everything that's exposed on the shelves, it's there for their learning. So they can do nothing but learn. Like the whole point is that when we put performance before relationship, we might lose relationship along the way. But if we put relationships before, then learning is inevitable. So we have this classroom that looks a bit like a home, because children can access themselves the materials that they need. But then just like a home again, we have these soft, comfortable areas that allow not only for flexible seatings. We know about flexible seating, and that's, again, I'm gonna say this throughout the whole talk, international schools are really already one step ahead when it comes to this. What they might not know is that these soft, comfortable areas and the fact that the classroom looks like a home allows for special needs children to be included in a way that it wouldn't be possible, because it allows them to work, to rest, and also it gives an idea of the learning space as a safe space. As we discussed before, it's about the environment, but it's also about our inner environment, our inner universe. So another pillar of this type of education is communication. And I have a few examples here so that it might spark some ideas, because obviously these ideas need to be adapted to the context where we are. But the very first thing is that these children are used to having sharing circles. If someone is familiar with restorative practices, this is going to be familiar to them. So in a sharing circle, it's not only like circle time where we might talk about the weather or what we're about to do or just a quick check-in, but it's actually a heart-to-heart, what's going on inside of you. And this creates, allows the children to cultivate their emotional literacy. And again, my thesis was really much about the parents' quote, and I want to be faithful for that. So I would like to read out another one where it says, something I always found striking about my daughter's ability is to express how she feels and how to convey it to others. And the interesting fact about this is that once the children are this relationally competent, even the parents, they express that they can be truthful with their children. They can express that they feel sad or angry and know that their children will be able to communicate with that and not feel either burdened or feel like that they have to ignore it. They'll have a positive, thriving relationship, even with their parents' emotional side. So because we have this sharing circle, but also because, and I asked one of my former students to give me hers, they have this. This is a drawing she made herself. This is a taccuino. It's a co-written journal between parent, teacher, and the child, of course. Here, all sorts of activities can take place, but what I wanted to focus on this webinar was the fact that more or less on a monthly basis, the teacher will have one-on-one time with the student, and she will write down a report on what the child or the student says about their inner world. So how is it going? How is the life at home? How is life in school? How is it going with that classmate? How is it going with this subject? And obviously the teacher is knowledgeable about how to handle this conversation. So if we know we have a difficult situation at home, that's taken into account. But all teachers, students, and the parents, they know that there's always a vehicle for communication that goes beyond like, what's the homework or what's going to happen. It goes much deeper than that. And what's very nice, going back a little bit to the environment, is that a lot of these one-on-one conversation happen in nature, because besides having an indoor environment that looks like home, once a week, and very often these kind of like alternative schools, they are placed even more than once a week, but they have a deep relationship to nature. So they might have some indoor spaces and still spend a lot of time in nature, which acts as a third teacher. We know from the Reggio Emilia approach that the environment is the third teacher. And when we hire nature to be that third teacher, the results are incredible, because children need to cooperate in all sorts of weather, whether it's too hot or too cold or too wet. And they also find lots of space. So if we think about those hyperactive children, or if we think about children who need their space to be reflective and to be slow, for example, nature has already built in all of the adjustments that are required for these kind of pupils. And even those who do not have special needs, obviously they benefit, because we all can feel sometimes like we need that space. So again, the practice looks like really curating the environment, involving nature, allowing for communication to be structured in a relationally aware way. And also something that's very interesting is when we use these tools, when there is everyday check-ins with the emotional world of the students, when we have another tool for like deeper reflection that involves also the parents, disciplinary action tends to become unnecessary. And even when there are maybe some moments when behaviors are making it difficult for learning, there are emergency circles that can be called upon. And this was really one of the most striking things from my research, is that because there is this culture of discussing things, and rather than looking for a victim and a culprit and trying to define how to punish and how to make sure that someone is blamed, what this emergency circle aim for is for everybody, not only the people involved, but the whole emotional and social environment, to take responsibility and to claim also their hurt, so that the point is not to punish, but to repair and to build trust. And so in a school where you don't have desks, you don't have disciplinary action, you also have something that's very similar to international schools, where there are no formal grades. What we have is formative and diversified assessment that's based on self-assessment and peer assessment. And that's, again, what I'm going to repeat throughout the whole talk, is that because international education already knows and understands how valuable these things are, we can see that it's also the other things, also the social emotional side can be applied. Because if they can do it in these small schools that act as educational laboratories, I hope maybe someone that's hearing this conversation will be like, maybe there is one small little change that can be applied in my classroom, in my life. Even just the fact of adults being reflecting for themselves and investigating their own inside world. So I think I gave more or less a picture of what that looks like. And because I think it's the most important part, I think this would be a good time maybe to be in breakout rooms and have people maybe talking to each other and see how that can be applied to their environment. What do you think?
Certainly. And I know that you would like to give some sort of guiding statements or questions for people to think about. The essence of what you're talking about is reflective practice, isn't it? It's about everybody reflecting together. And I think your lovely journal idea was a statement of that. And so we'll move into a reflective period now. And perhaps if we could have about 10 minutes to go into a reflection with, I think probably about, we've got several people here, so we could have breakout groups of about 3 people in each group. Abby, are you able to organize those?
Yep, I'll send them out.
And
yeah,
then,
in the meantime, I'm gonna invite you to take a screenshot of these slides you see. Again, always because I want to give credit where credit is due. This is thank you for the beautiful Nancy Squicciarini from ECIS. So the point is not to answer all of these questions, but to pick one of these questions and address it as a group.
so each group will take one of those areas: connection, challenges, concepts, or changes, and we'll have 10 minutes to spend some really good time and some deep conversation there around the questions, and perhaps you can have a little bit of feedback afterwards. Okay, see you in 10 minutes. So welcome back from your groups. Melany, just before we move on, just an apology to people because evidently there was a little bit of a glitch with the breakout rooms, but we hope that you had some good conversations and that you were able to go a little bit more deeply. Great, thank you very much for the lovely response there. Melany, do you want to, or can we invite people to turn on your cameras if you've got a capacity for showing your lovely faces? And if you'd like to ask any questions or just give some feedback, Melany, do you want to be able to get some feedback from the groups?
Most definitely. I would also would like to invite those who don't feel like being on camera to maybe use the chat, both for question, comments, and even just in general to maybe share maybe one word, one sentence, something that they want to bring home with them, talking back about home.
Great. So you're invited to put your comments, something that you've taken from this so far and from your conversation in the chat. That would be lovely. And then we might pounce on some people and see if we can get some feedback from the groups. Paulina, shall we, there are two of you on your camera. Would you like to let us know a little bit about what you were talking about in your group?
Hello, we didn't join the group. We started a conversation between the two of us, and then we felt a little bit silly, so we didn't want to join the breakout room, and we continued the conversation on our phone. So we are the wrong people.
Is there something you'd like to share from the conversation that you had with one another?
We were actually just saying that the things which like Melany shared with us, the approach, we feel like these are things which we are trying to implement in our school. I think it's still the beginning of it, of building this, cheer for children, parents, the community. So we felt like, oh, this is exactly what we're talking about on like daily basis, but it's still, like.
It's really, Paulina is the school psychologist, and I'm the assistant director, and we part of a school that has a tradition of not embracing this type of. It's much more top down, I would say, and so we are finding it difficult to implement all these ideas, but we completely with Melany, and we just this is what we believe in as well.
Super, thank you very much for sharing. Thank you. I see the lovely Chris Parakis is here as well. Chris, do you want to share with us what were the takeaways from your group session?
I think, good afternoon, everyone. Aisha actually put it on the on our chat. We were in group 4, and she wrote, the key takeaway from our discussion was a sense of belongingness, inclusion, involving parents, giving authority for voicing out of students. It was a very vivid conversation between the three of us, but we were all in agreement how important student voices and having the parents as partners for their children's success and with the schools. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you.
I think about that, maybe I could add a little bit more about the parent involvement, because I think it might be insightful for Paulina. And again, it will go on with what Chris was saying. In order to achieve these sort of environments, we start with a deep respect for ourselves, first of all, as human beings, as a teacher, as a mother, as woman, as man, whatever we identify as. And it goes on with the involvement of the parents. And a few other examples that come from this school is that parents are welcome every Friday for the nature day, but they're very often in these sort of schools, because they are called actually in Italian scuola parentale. It means actually that the parents, because it has to do with Italian law, they have actually responsibility over their children's learning. So they cannot claim to outsource that responsibility to the school. And in order to furthermore invest into these kind of schools, they design the time, the schedule, so that the parents are involved. So I know many international schools have projects where parent who works at X company will come in and bring their expertise. And again, that's why international schools are the best place to take it a step further. The next step, in order to include that from the social emotional standpoint, would be then to have these spaces, these times throughout the day or throughout the week, where parents are welcome to just drop by and not just drop off the kids. And so that the presence of the parents becomes the norm and not the exception. And furthermore, this type of institution, because they are founded on maybe like Montessori or Reggio Emilia principles, or some adaptation of these alternative pedagogies, they give out trainings. They open the doors, even when the kids are not in school, for the parents to even just do the same lessons kids will have done, maybe some grammar using hands-on material, or maybe math that involves the whole body. So there is this exchange of parents coming into the classroom as also co-teachers almost. They share their responsibility of their children learning, and then the learning going to the parents by having the teachers sharing, so that there is no homework to be done, but if they want to study something, or if the parents want to feel knowledgeable about the fact that they use a certain tool or a certain strategy, they feel comfortable with that. So maybe involving the parents would be an interesting starting point, depending on what your community looks like. But what I want to say is that they are very much a hidden resource.
It's very interesting to hear you talking about the parent inclusion there. Thank you for exploring that a little bit further. I'm very interested that, I come from Germany, where the state is responsible for the child's education. And you talk about the Italian setting, that the parents actually responsible for the child's education, which is a really, interesting different shift there. Are schools, regardless of whether they're in a school building or whether they're a free education, a free movement, are they obliged to keep to a specific curriculum, or are there standards that have to be kept to? Or
as far as I know, in Italy, there are mandated yearly exams, which is what substitutes those grades and tests. So the trade-off is this: a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, instead of having like every month or so test that might be formative, they will just present their project very much like in line with inquiry-based and project-based learning. And at the end of the school year, they will go to a state-recognized school, and there they will bring their project. They will do also written exam, appropriate for their age, obviously. And so whether the responsibility is with the parents or with the school, what really matters, I think, it's what's possible within the community. It might be a bit strange to maybe a German school to say, hey, parents are responsible too. However, if we address this with curiosity and say, like, how would you like as a parent to be involved, beside bringing what you have, like in terms of professional expertise, as a human, what would you like to bring? What are the traits that you want to share? Are you a very joyful person? Are you a silly person? I know it might sound a bit simplistic, and of course, because of the nature of this talk, it can be. However, by approaching these questions with curiosity rather than trying to have a critical mindset where, like, oh, what's going to work, what's not going to work, we don't know what we're going to find. That's a bit what I want to inspire.
That's exciting in itself. You've talked about the practice, and you've talked about the ideals and the values of parental involvement and partnership in the education of the child. Let's finish off by just having a think about the impact that this has. Is the time frame for this kind of learning opportunity, perhaps newer learning opportunities for families to be working in these ways? Has there been enough time to be able to sort of pull any data, or is it still in a sort of perhaps in an experimental stage? Do you have any evidence that would be able to talk about how this relational approach is having impact on teaching, on learning, on the well-being for the students, parents, and educators?
So as far my research goes, the evidence I could pull was indeed the testimonies from these parents. And one specifically talks about the fact that her child, in his own time, can get there. So while the sentence itself might not mean a lot, we are talking here about a child who was actually expelled from state school because of his neurodivergency. His issues would be also behavioral. So what will happen is that instead of being able to regulate his emotion and be able to learn, it would just be disruptive. In a place where the environment is set in a certain way, there is a consistent presence of nature, relationships are at the heart of everything that's done. Children like him thrive. And even though it might be, well, for the benefit of one special need child, should we reinvent the wheel of school? What we see is that these changes that we do for the inclusion that we do for these children ends up benefiting everybody else. And what I mentioned also earlier, it impacts the family. I'm not sure if I already said it. Forgive me if I did. I just became a mother, so my brain is a bit foggy some days. But because these children are so emotionally literate, the parents feel like they can be themselves. So the impact is that the consciousness of this trickles beyond just the classroom. And another mother was also talking about how there is harmony in conflict. So the ability to have harmony and having the children leading this harmony. So it's not only about what happens for these kids, but what will the kids do after they leave school. For some of them, it's been the change between dropping out and not being able to pursue education. We had I went back to this institution, and one of the students that I know had to do with this research, was very proudly showing off that now he's off to high school and he managed to be there and he has good grades and he's very proud of himself. So that's also something when you talk about neurodivergent and people with all sorts of disabilities, they tend to have a very negative self-image. But because we centered the relationship, we really went into working with the vocabulary of your inner world. Once you go out and out in the world, there might be harsh realities. They have this built-in sense of self that protects them and allows them to still be efficient, you know, to be able to have self-efficacy. Sarah, you are on mute.
Don't know how that happened. Thank you. But also a feeling of accomplishment and recognizing their own learning and their own learning journey. Fantastic. Melany, thank you so much. It's something that you said earlier on, just before we went out into the breakouts, actually, where you were quoting a mother talking about expressing her child being able to express how she feels. And this is that sort of jumped off the page a bit for me because we have done quite a lot of work with Dr. Mark Brackett from Yale University recently, and he's going to be taking us on a sort of a book journey of his second book, dealing with feelings, in the next little while, starting on the 20th of November. So I'm going to pop something in the chat about that as well, just so that people can see the link and take that, explore that if that's useful to them as well. But this whole idea of children being able to express their emotions, so that, as you say, in the conflict situation, they may be leading the resolution themselves. Thank you for pulling that one out. That's was really interesting to hear as well. I'm going to leave you with the final word, Melany, if there's anything that you want to say before we all go. But I'm just going to say quickly before then, thank you so much to everybody who's come to this session. It's been really lovely that so many people are here. I know that sometimes it's difficult with cameras and microphones and so forth, but it's been a really fabulous session. And Melany, thank you very much for preparing this for us today, so that we get a slightly, a rather more detailed idea of what it is that you're doing, and how alternative schooling approaches are helping to shape and question more traditional approaches in schools. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, then I know that you'll give them your details, and any questions to ECIS. We're always delighted to hear from you. Thank you. Melany, last word.
Yeah. So as I did at the beginning, for me, it's really important to give my thanks to CAM and to ECIS, because this thesis was only possible because there was a sponsorship for me through ECIS. And so I think it's just right for me not only to give credit, but also to further bring this research into life. So if any of you that were listening either live or in the recorded session would like to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I would love to continue bringing you this research and maybe share it also with your school.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and then on that note, we'll say thank you very, very much to all of you, and have a lovely day, evening, wherever you are in the globe. And we look forward to seeing you at other ECI events very soon. Thank you.